Okay, today we are looking at finding the difference, factoring difference of squares. Before we can talk about difference of squares, we need to first understand what are some perfect squares. It is a good idea to try and memorize our perfect squares up to 20 squared. So I'm going to write down 1 squared, 2 squared, 3 squared. I'm going to go all the way up to 20 squared. Oh, I'm up to 6, let's say 7, 8. Let's see, we got 9, 10, 11. These things will make your life a lot easier just by memorizing a few little things. 13, 14, 15, 16. Oh, here we go here. 17 over here. 18, 19, and 20. And then anytime you find one that's not on our list, add it to the list. That will help you. Going through here, got my little equal signs. After this, we need to go through and actually plug these things in. So 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9, and 4 squared is 16. 5 squared is 25, 6 squared is 36, 7 squared is 49, 8 squared is 64. Moving to the next column, we have 9 squared is 81, 10 squared is 100, 11 squared is 121, 12 squared is 144. That's a gross. 13 squared is 169, 14 squared is 196, 15 squared is 225, and 16 squared is 256. 17 squared is 289, 18 squared is 324, 19 squared is 361, and 20 squared is 400. It is good to know these things, especially up to 20 would be awesome. 25 is even better, but you should definitely know them to 15 no matter what. Knowing these will make our life easier when we're dealing with difference of squares and factoring, but also other things that we'll be doing later throughout the year. Now that we have some perfect squares going on, we can then look at our problem here. So my first problem says x squared minus 16. Well, x squared, that right there automatically is a perfect square. Anytime you have an even exponent, that is a perfect square. And 16, was 16 on my list of perfect squares? Well, let me see. Yes, it was. Everything on the right-hand side, these are all perfect squares. Perfect squares. Perfect squares are the ones on the right-hand side. The numbers on the left-hand side would be their square roots. We all have roots. So what's the square root of 16? Well, that would be 4. And the square root of x squared would be x. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to automatically drop down and put 2 sets of parentheses. I put the square root of the first one, x, in the first spot. I put the square root of the second number, 4, in the back spot. And then I put 1 plus 1 minus in between them. And that's how we factor the difference of squares. Looking at example 2, I have 9x squared. Well, the square root of 9x squared would be 3x, and the square root of 4 would be 2. So my problem would be the 3x in the front, 2 in the back, a plus and a minus, and Bob's your uncle. So what is the pattern? You want to take the square root of each term then separate with 1 being plus and 1 being minus. So let's look at some more examples of what we got going on here. So with this first one right here, I have x squared minus 9. So since I have x squared and I got two perfect squares, I can automatically drop down here. I put me an x, I put me an x. The square root of 9 is 3, so I put a 3 and I put a 3. And then I put a plus and I put a minus. And then we stick a fork in that bad boy. He is done. Looking at example 4. 49h squared. 49h squared is a perfect square. That is 7h. 144, that is on our list of squares. That is 12. So I automatically drop down. I put a 7h in the front. I put a 12 in the back side. I put a plus and I put a minus. And that one's done. Looking at example 5. And in example 5, here I have a 25k squared, so that would be 5k if I take the square root of it. I have a 64j squared, that would be 8j. They are perfect squares, so therefore I automatically drop down. And I put 5k, I put 5k, I put 8j, I put 8j, I put a plus, I put a minus, and Bob's your uncle. And that one is done. Now looking at number 6, this one here's a perfect square, that's 2a. This one over here is a perfect square, that's 5b. But remember, we said we had to do the difference of squares. Uh-oh! That is not a minus sign. Since that's not a minus sign, it does not matter that these are perfect squares. We automatically stop right here and we write prime. At this point, we cannot factor these. So we have just concluded factoring difference of squares. It is good to make sure you memorize these up to 20. Make your life a lot easier. Good luck. Pay attention to what you're doing.